Hey guys, today is July 10th at 2 a.m. Eastern Time. And in case you've been under a rock this weekend, Vans Aircraft released a video on YouTube of the RV-15. We're not sure if this is the RV-15 prototype's first flight. It's certainly one of the early flights, if not the first. So if you haven't seen that yet, I would urge you to go over to the Vans Aircraft YouTube page, watch it. You can also find it on their Facebook page. Give them the views, they deserve it, and then come back here and we can talk about what we actually saw in the video. So one of the first things that you may have noticed about this aircraft is the tail number, November 7357. Now, there have been a few people on Facebook and the forums who have been watching the Vans Aircraft FAA registrations, and we did see a couple registrations come through. The first one was this one here for November 415 X-Ray Victor, which, okay, that sounds like it would be their first aircraft. So, and even the serial number matches up to something that we would be looking for. 015 designating it as, an RV-15, and 000 being probably, the first one of many to come. Now, interestingly, maybe a little bit of misdirection on Vans Aircraft part. They registered this as an RVX. Maybe they weren't sure what they were going to call it. I don't know. Maybe they thought that people weren't looking for RVX. But regardless, people found it, and people took this tail number and they put it in their flight trackers to watch out for the first flight. They registered this on May 25th. Now, what some people missed was that there was another registration a week earlier, an RV8X, and even the serial number here, 08, designating this as maybe an RV8. This too, they registered, maybe they were hoping people weren't going to pick up on it, and the tail number for this is November 7357, which is what we see here in the video. So that's a little backstory for you. Now, looking into the video itself, if we rewind this here, so a couple of things I did initially was I took some of the visual cues here that you see in this the first section where we take off, and I correlated some of the points in the distance to points in the foreground, and so we have a pretty rough idea of where the camera is positioned. Now, there's a couple of things going on here. First, if you guys have been watching even this tail number on your flight trackers, you probably missed it. And the reason for that is that this plane was not squawking with ADS-B. And the reason for that is if you look here at the lights on the aircraft, the nav lights are on, the runway lights are on, and if we advance it just a little bit, you see that reflection of the sun in the aircraft's tail. This runway is facing north, so we're looking at the morning sun probably before the control tower opened, which means that this airfield is non-towered, Class E. ADS-B is not required. Now, if it's equipped, you have to have it turned on, but the factory may have just yanked out the ADS-B transceiver, transponder, and just squawked mode C, and that would be legal. You can't just turn it off if your plane is equipped, though, for purposes of evasion. So if you were following these flights, that's probably why your phone didn't ring saying, hey, this tail number is in the air. So going back to the map that I drew here on Google Maps, a couple other things I drew in is lines for where the runway lights are, because I wanted to see exactly how long this takeoff roll was. The plane entered on Alpha 5 here onto runway 35, and it starts rolling, and right at, it looks like right about here, this is where it lifts off, and it looks like it is that'd be the first, and that would be the second set of runway lights. And if we go back to our map here, we see the first set is here, second set is here. that is, well, let's just use a ruler and find out here. So maybe we started the takeoff roll about here, and we took off about here. That looks like 317 feet, 300 feet. That sounds about right. This takeoff roll was only 6, maybe 7 seconds long. So that's pretty impressive. The flaps don't appear to be down. So this wasn't a performance takeoff or anything like that. If we advance it a little bit further here, now the one thing that you note is this big rod off the left side of the wing here. That is a pitot tube. I think typically when you're flight testing something, a new aircraft, you want your pitot tube to be way far out in front of the wing, so you know for a fact that there's nothing on the airframe itself which is going to interfere with that pitot tube, and you get a really accurate airspeed. You know, I'm not an engineer, but that's my take of it. So a couple of things that I noticed here. One was this ginormous window/door for the pilot and co-pilot. I hope that's going to be in production. That's very nice. I'm going to assume that that's going to be a plexiglass window there with a aluminum frame around it. It looks like it's hinged at the front with 2 hinges in the center of the front of the door, and then also at the bottom. And there's a latch just to the center aft of the door. And you can see here, if we advance the video a little bit more, it looks like you rotate the latch clockwise to open it. Another thing that I noticed here were the wheels. I was not familiar with this wheel type, but apparently this is used on a lot of RVs, experimentals, light sport. These are Behringer wheels. I can't tell if they're 5-inch or 6-inch wheels. They look the same, especially from a distance. It does look like it's a dual piston caliper on the brakes, and the brake design I think is pretty nice, where the pistons are stationary and it's actually the rotor itself that floats. Typically it's the caliper that floats. The last thing that I really noticed here was the flaps, or the flap hinges, or the rails, I guess you might call them. It looks like, based on these hinges I see here, it looks like the flap is going to go out and down. If we go over here to YouTube and pull up a nice little graphic here, I think these are going to be slotted flaps. We'll know more when we actually see them operate. So that should give a pretty good benefit in slow flight. Again, we see the ginormous pitot tube. One thing to note here is the exhaust pipes. That looks like it might be a Lycoming engine. Now the propeller looks like it's a Sensenik composite propeller. Might even be the same that's on the RV-12. We have yet to see about that. Maybe a larger blade or a longer blade. And we don't know the pitch of that blade yet, but it's a fixed pitch and it's ground adjustable. So you might be able to adjust it for your type of flying that you do. So we have 2 tailpipes. We have looks like a pretty sizable tail wheel. I'm not a tail wheel guy, so I can't really compare it to other aircraft. In the back of the aircraft, it looks like the static port is located back here, just forward of the stabilator. And that's a good point. This does look like it's a stabilator with a anti-servo tab right in the center here. Here's your anti-servo tab. This looks like the same sort of design as on the RV-12. I fly the RV-12 a lot. I like that design. I think it makes sense. The only thing that is lacking here is maybe some fairings for the tips of the stabilator. I think that just looks makes it look like a polished and finished design. What I also see here are ailerons on the really outboard edges of the wings here, and the flaps are a good portion of the inboard portion of the wing. We also see one, two, looks like two, maybe three access panels to get inside the wing. What else do we see here? Looks like we have a fairly huge rudder and tail there, and a pretty upright tail at that too. So inside the cockpit here, there's a lot going on here that we can look at. So the first thing is it looks like there's no pulleys and cables involved with the ailerons. It looks like the push-pull tubes. I like that design. I think you have better responsiveness in the controls, which is what I think all RV aircraft have. I don't think there's any cables for the ailerons in any of their models. We see this trapeze handle on the left and right sides here and over here. Now the left one is a little bit difficult to see where that cable or that rope routes to. On the left, or the co-pilot side here, we see it goes through a tube, goes over the plexiglass and down the outside of the aircraft. Now what I think this is if we rewind it a little bit to what we see here, it looks like that rope comes out the side here and right down to these two hinges. I think this handle is basically for this test pilot to jettison either of those doors in case he gets himself into trouble. This pilot, it doesn't look familiar. I don't think he works for Vans. I think they probably hired him as a test pilot. His name is Softy. We're going to call him Mr. Softy for now. But Mr. Softy is no softy. He can bail out if he wants to. I'll tell you that. Pull that handle, get rid of that door, and out the side you go. None of that Trevor Jacobs stuff where you have the door flapping as you're trying to slow the plane and jump out. No, just get rid of that door and go. The door latch handle, these yellow balls at the top here. Now this is an interesting design. Usually the latch handle will be on the door itself, but because this door is made basically of pure plexiglass, you can't really have a locking mechanism in the door. So I think the locking mechanism is in the airframe itself, and it probably just attaches some fingers or some latch to the door to keep it shut. I think it makes sense where it's located. If you locate it at the aft end of the door, here we can see it here. If you locate it back here, you're going to have trouble getting to that. You're going to have to kind of twist yourself around to get to that latch. So I think it makes sense to put it where it's at up here. Above the pilot, we see this ginormous flap handle. Now, it looks ginormous. It might not be, just based on the type of camera or GoPro that's used here. I think these type of bush pilots will like it. I certainly wouldn't mind a manual flap handle if I had this type of aircraft. The one thing that struck me is the skylights. They sort of reminded me of the Cessna 152 that I learned in, that had these tiny little skylights in it. I wouldn't mind seeing a third skylight right in the center of this aircraft. It looks like you could put one in. I don't think that skin is structural. I could be wrong, but I think you could put a third window up there if you wanted to. Now, I'm hoping that this is part of the test pilot or the test aircraft thing, but this fuel tank has to go. I was hoping for fuel in the wings. The RV-12 has this, and in fact, the original RV-12 had a similar tank in the baggage area, and there went half of your baggage area. I'm really hoping that this is just for them to maybe move ballast around or add water ballast as part of testing. I'm hoping that there's tanks in the wings. Now, what makes me think that there might be is this access panel right over here. I can't imagine what would be inside the wing at this point. Maybe some hookups for the fuel tank inside the wing. But at the same time, I don't see any tubing coming in from the wing. We have this black tube coming in. That could be a fuel tube. More likely, though, it's probably electrical. Having said that, though, over here on the right side, we see what they have going on for electrical, and those are these white wires coming in. So that's going to be a good question, is where is the fuel going to be? The RV-12 has it in a tank behind the pilot in the baggage area. All other RVs have it in the wings. This plane I don't think is going to have detachable wings like the RV. That was the main reason why they put the fuel tank in the fuselage in the RV-12, was so that when you put the wings on and take them off, you didn't have to hook up the fuel lines. Looking in the back of the behind the pilot here, we see a whole bunch of space. Now, it might be a little bit difficult to see what's going on here, but we have the baggage area consists of the area that has the window, and then also another area between these two bulkheads here, and here, that looks like it's completely free. If we get the side view of the aircraft, we see here that the baggage area is going to be this area right here, and also this area right here, forward of this rivet line right here. So that's looks like a pretty sizable baggage area. Now, the question is whether or not there's enough room in there to fit 2 seats in the back. I think you could fit 2 seats in the back. Now, whether or not you have enough headroom and leg room, that's a good question. Can it support the weight? I'm going to say probably, but that's going to depend on what type of engine and weight and balance and stuff. On the external of the aircraft, we see on the top of the wing, we have the VHF antenna and ELT antenna. I think this is the first aircraft of fans that has an ELT antenna outside the fuselage. Typically, it's located in the baggage area underneath some plexiglass window. Underneath the aircraft, if we take a look back here, we see that we have a looks like the transponder antenna right here, and there might be something here. I can't tell if those are antennas or if those are just reflections of something or other underneath the aircraft. It could be nothing. And one of the early questions that we had is whether or not this would be a pull rivet or a solid rivet construction project. It's really difficult to tell in these pictures if it's a solid rivet that we see here on the wings and on the fuselage. My guess is it's going to be a pull rivet, just based on the pitch that we're seeing here. I think these rivets are spaced too closely together for it to be a solid rivet plane. The pull rivets don't work nearly as well as the solid rivets, and you need more of them. Overall, it looks like a pretty good design. It's going to be interesting to see where the landing gear attaches for the RV-15A model. I'm going to assume that one of these little panels gets removed and there's another mounting point for the gear. What we can't tell, it looks like the gear goes through the fuselage. It doesn't look like it's just mounted underneath it. So that's about it. I wish Mr. Softy, our test pilot, good luck. It looks like it's a really good, well-built aircraft. And we all look forward to seeing it this July at Oshkosh. I don't see any reason why this aircraft should not make it to Oshkosh at this point. Even in its prototype state, if it's airworthy enough for them to be test flying it for 40 hours, I don't see why it can't make the trip out to Wisconsin. So that will be a good little treat for us this year.